Hello and welcome to the Soul Sync podcast. I'm Jason Paul. Now, I'm really excited. I'm excited to bring this next conversation to you because it's honestly been quite a long time in the making, because this guest is quite hard to persuade to come on to things like this because it's not naturally something that they would seek out to do. And the guest I've got is a medium and a teacher called Eileen Davies, and I've been really privileged to know Eileen for a couple of years now, and she's been a big influence on my mediumship, my life, in a lot of different ways, actually. And she's touched my heart many a time. So Eileen's come on, and we're going to be talking in this episode about topics like what mysticism really is. And we touch on, it's not beliefs, it's not labels, but it's how you live. And Eileen really kind of infused that into me, actually, in a number of the talks that I've attended of hers of the past. And we're going to be talking about something that's really interesting, which is the difference about sort of talking about spirituality even, and what it actually means to live a spiritual life. And it's a question that I've asked myself so many different times because, you know, I know what it means to live through a lens of love, but I'm constantly questioning, even to myself, am I living a spiritual life, and how can I live my life in a better way? And we touch on that, and that was really interesting in the conversation. We also talked about how force and over trying actually get in the way of spirit. And I know that so many times because I've tried so hard with my mediumship at times, and I just didn't understand why it just wasn't working. And it was literally the trying, believe it or not, that got in the way. But that's the thing, any other aspect of our life, what are we doing? We have to try, we have to work hard. It's programmed and it's instilled in us from a very young age. So Eileen and I talk about that. We also talk about emotional mediumship versus technical mediumship. And that is something else that got me stuck for a long time, because I realised that there's a difference between people who teach technically and emotionally. And Eileen really made me realise that for a while in my mediumship, I was being taught in a way that it just didn't click with me. I didn't understand certain things. And, you know, it's just about the simplicity of it. And Eileen really does talk from the heart. And when she teaches, it's very much, it feels like the spirit through her. So you're in for a treat. It's a beautiful conversation. This is my conversation with Eileen Davies. So, Eileen Davies, welcome to the Soul Sync.
Thank you, Jason.
It's lovely to have you here. Well, it's an honour to have you here, and I do feel like you are one of the most highly anticipated people I've had to persuade a lot to try and come on. And I'm very glad that you've graced us with your presence. So thank you. It's lovely to have you here. So, well, I'm not going to go into too much detail about, you know, all of your background right now, because I want to really get the most out of this conversation.
Fabulous.
Yes. And so I wanted to get stuck straight in. And if you want to know who Eileen is, you know, you can go online. But you're a medium, you're a teacher, you're a tutor, and you've been doing this for a very long time. And I'm very privileged and honoured that to have also, you know, be under your mentorship as well. So I wanted to ask, and this is a question that, you know, I've often asked myself, and I often continue to ask myself, on what does it actually mean to live a spiritual life? Because, you know, I'm in search of that question myself, and it's something that I have to ask myself a lot.
Yeah.
Practicing what you preach, I guess, is...
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, being you, being your authentic self. I think there's been a danger within the spiritualist movement, essentially, to departmentalize, you know, their spiritual life and their everyday life. And really, it's like two twines of a thread that, you know, woven together and as one. So it's about doing anything that's mundane and trying to transform it to a higher level. Let's use that expression, the level of the divine. And we do that by being present, being completely and absolutely present within any task in any given moment, which is an ultimate challenge. But even if you begin to put effort in, eventually it shows results. And just allowing yourself to be you. And I think to live from the spirit of truth, of authenticity, And, because spirituality isn't about feeling separate from life, it takes you deeper into life. Obviously, you're opening up your sensitivity, or maybe connecting more fully with your sensitivity. And we shouldn't get indulging, coming over emotional, but it means fully being present in life. Realizing that everybody, everywhere, everyone that you meet has their own story, has something beautiful to offer life to each new moment.
It sounds to me like what you're describing as well is a feeling, because, a lot of people, they're not able to be fully present because they're in a state of worry, or there's, I've now coined it muggle things, Eileen. I know it's quite funny actually, because I've started looking at little things like, the sort of things that go on where you realise that, that's maybe an ego behaviour of someone, or they're struggling there, or they're doing that. And, the sort of trivial stuff that happens day to day in work, to not allow myself to get emotionally attached to that. I've now coined that as, well, it's not very, very professional, actually. It's Muggle S. Well, you can understand the rest. I won't say that, Eileen, in your presence. I wouldn't dare. But that's what I've coined it. But how it sounds to me, what you're describing is you're feeling each task, you're doing each task, you're present in it because it's fueled by passion. But the realities of life is that just isn't the case, is it, all the time?
No, and that therein lies the challenge. It's dealing with the everyday rubbish that life throws at us. And looking a little bit deeper, it's the same as when somebody's behaving badly and you're the, focal point of their anger or their fear or their lack of connection. It's trying to make the effort to look behind the action. What's making that person behave in that way? Why are they like that in this moment, rather than getting caught up in a reaction? So I don't think we do that. And I don't think we actually stop to properly connect with people. So much can be revealed through the voice. And when I was a child, everybody was a child once, I didn't realize it until some years ago that I always listened, engaged intently on the tone, the vibration of someone's voice. And then when I started developing mediumship, it became apparent that the soul reveals itself through the vibration of the voice. So when you really connect, it allows you to touch something deep, something sacred within that person, and it enables you to connect in a way that is beyond the capacity of most people, because everybody is so preoccupied with what they're going to do tomorrow, what they're going to do when they get home. And so when we've lost the simple art of being truly present and connecting in that way. So I think if you can practice that, engaging, connecting, really deep listening, and that in itself is an aspect of mediumistic development.
I found myself, even in recent months, just trying not to control things as much. I felt to myself, I'd ran for years with my business, trying to control all these things, getting, lost in the emotion of day-to-day stuff. Oh, this is going right. This is going good. This is going bad. This is going this. And now I just feel like I'm sort of flowing more in that. But if I can understand why it's such a journey. To live a spiritual life is not an easy thing to do, especially in the world that we're in now.
Absolutely. I think it's even more challenging in many ways than probably it ever has been, because everything everywhere is, people are living at such a fast pace. And, I think when we get really stressed, it's lack of rest. If you look at the word stress and flip it round, it's saying we're not acknowledging ourselves enough. We're not listening to ourselves. We're not just resting and being, because we're so conditioned to be busy, to be doing, to achieving. And, you mention a beautiful word, attachment. when you were no longer attached to the results of your business and how things were going to go. Now, that's, if we look at all spiritual traditions, they mention detachment. And even with mediumship itself, when you're no longer attached to the outcome, you enable yourself to be in the flow of the communication. But it's the same with life itself. When we're no longer attached to how good this is going to be, making judgments, things sort of happen in their own way. And I think that's a very, very beautiful place to be, when you realize that we don't always have to be striving, seeking, pushing ourselves. And I think collectively, if we can get out of the mindset that, just doing nothing is absolutely okay, just being still, taking a sense of deep connection with one another, with the world around us, and really not just seeing, but seeing with the eyes of the heart, with the eyes of the soul.
I guess because I look at attachment as, attachment is the human condition, but that's because we live in a world that is the scarcity mindset. And that's, I guess, a role that sort of dovetails on the back of mediumship and what it's there to sort of prove for people to be able to live that spiritual life. I want to go back because in time, because to teach mediumship now is even harder when everyone is, so not present. So do you, when we go back to the sort of days of the old, and I've become obsessed recently with these old mediumship books, because I'm not the best reader at the best of times, which is even terrible, Eileen, because your book honestly has been on it's been in my orbit for a very long time. The corners are starting to look like I've read it. But it's my intention to read it that is making it look so. But when I go back to these books of the old, what I find with modern books, and even just a lot of things, is they're trying to tell people, to do this, to do that, to do this, and it's glamorized. There's a lot of glamour. But when I go, and what used to put me off the older books was the language, was the old. But when I look back at those older books now, they're factual. They talk in a factual way, and whereas now I feel that we're living in a world of opinion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Does that make sense? Is that resonating?
Yeah, no, it's a really, really good point. I think, if you look at our pioneers, they were taught just to listen to the spirit world. They were taught just to be in the stillness and the silence. So they had this lovely connection and awareness when the presence of the other world were there. And they weren't taught by a tutor here or there, or they didn't have workshops and the availability in the online classes that we have now. They were just taught by the other world. So because of that, they were tapping into what I was called eternal truths. And, eternal truths are timeless. It is what I've just said. It doesn't date. Okay, the language, the vocabulary may change, but it is what it is. And, we could revisit it 100 years from now, and communicating with the unseen world will still be from someone who has a pure heart, a good intent, because there's so much now within the teaching of mediumship that has become schooled. And I think it's become over-schooled. And by virtue of doing that, we're no longer allowing people to experience the sacredness of their own unique way of communicating with the spirit world. I mean, I've always maintained there's only one way, and that's your way. And it's up to you to find out your own way, because how you perceive the spirit will be different from how I perceive the spirit. And so it's about giving people permission to find their own path, to find their own way.
Well, your way of teaching is just, well, it's beautiful. My mediumship has come on leaps and bounds. I was getting lost for a very long time in my mediumship in techniques and to push the aura. And I didn't realize there was a different. Honestly, I would sit there and I'd go, right, I need to go inwards and downwards to the soul. And then I need to push the aura out. And I need, and the whole time I'm thinking, and, I didn't realise that. But when I came across your path, I noticed a distinct difference, that the simplicity, but it is also the simplicity that makes it so complicated. But you're teaching, not in a way of technique. And that is where I think people are getting lost in workshops and all these different things that are going on in the modern day world, is because, well, I was going for one teacher telling me to push me all out in this way and another one to do it in this way. And, I'm confused because I'm not finding my own way. I'm trying to take the way of that teacher.
Absolutely. And that, what you've just voiced, so many other people have said the same thing. You go to one person one week and they say, do it like this. And you go to somebody else the next, they say, no, you don't do it like that. You do it like this. And consequently, everybody everywhere is getting completely confused. And no wonder. I mean, I would have had a hard time, I think, if I was developing now. But, you really just have to throw all the techniques away, because any technique will just engage the mind. And when you're engaging the mind, you'll start intellectualizing it. You'll start analyzing it. Is it good enough? Is it correct? Could that person really have a mum in the spirit world? And once you've gone down that track, it's very, very difficult to get back.
It is.
So you've got to put all that away and just rest in stillness. And from your loving intent, reach out to the other world. I always say to students, who loves the person enough in the spirit world to want to be here for them today? So simple. And then just take your attention just to being still, to pure listening. And then what happens, because energy always follows thought attracts its own kind, you'll find that your attention will move away from this level, this tangible physical world, to the unseen. Then your sensitivity within that moment, it's like a bit of magic happens. You start becoming conscious of the presence of someone who's making an effort from the spirit world to reach you. So that
how are they just always there? Whenever you do it, they're always there. What is going on there?
Well, that's a little bit of the magic of communication, isn't it? And I think essentially, our spiritual self, and indeed those in the spirit world, living in a linear reality, and they're not affected by things such as time or space or distance. So they receive the loving intent. Because, as I said, energy is very, very powerful. And so they pick up, they receive. It's a little bit like our loving intent is like dialing their phone number.
Isn't that incredible, though? That this is where we start, and this is where, well, I've come to the conclusion now, and I have said this before, that I'm now spending the rest of my life unlearning everything I have learned in the first half of my life. But even the fact that we don't realise the power of our thoughts, we can have a thought and instantly that thought has gone to wherever that spirit person is currently, and within an instant they're there.
Absolutely.
And then but then we need to, I guess this goes back to a spiritual life, the power of, one's thought, how powerful that is.
Yeah, I really think that we totally underestimate the power of thought, and people go around thinking that their thoughts are contained to the dimensions of their physical form. And it's not like that at all. Thoughts move into space, and the space around us and beyond, so to speak, because we're entering that which is timeless when we start speaking about thoughts, because thought isn't of a material substance or nature. So it comes essentially from the soul. I mean, all sorts of psychoanalysis, it's all to do with initially the brain and the mind, but thought originates within the soul itself. So if you opened up your brain, you
wouldn't want to do that, Eileen. Trust me, you'd find all sorts in there.
No, but you wouldn't find a thought, because it's not of a physical nature. So where are our thoughts? We take with us into the eternal worlds our memories from, those beautiful magical moments. And they live within the soul. So when we pass, of course, we put aside, our physical body, we put aside the egoic self and all those limiting conditionings that have probably stopped us expressing and being who we really are. So thoughts are far more powerful than we realize. And we could send healing to somebody in the same room as us right now. We could send healing to somebody in New Zealand. That the healing will reach the person, whether they're in the room or in New Zealand, within the same moment. See, that's
incredible.
There's the spirit world, communicating with the spirit world.
Well, I've even started becoming so aware now that everything has a negative imprint. Like, I found, well, this is an embarrassing story, but anyway, I was having a chat with someone on a dating website. Then anyway, I started to think that person had a negative energy, and then I thought their picture is on my phone. That a picture has a frequency and an energy that is constantly, I don't want to bring you into my dating life, Eileen, I won't do that, but it was emanating that energy, and I thought, I feel that energy from that picture. I need to delete that picture now. And it started making me very aware of even like objects and things that are in my energetic kind of, awareness. So I've started becoming much more conscious of that as well as thoughts. But you did something beautiful with this whole positivity band. This positivity band is revolutionary, this idea. How many people I've told about it.
Yeah.
And it's a really good experiment. Do you know what? I've talked about it on this podcast before, but you must explain this very technical but brilliant but simple exercise, what it's about, because it changed my life, that experiment, because, Eileen, I didn't realise just that I was even having a fear-based thought.
Yeah, I think it's so easy to get caught up in the fear. Really at the moment out there, the news everywhere, we're being bombarded, aren't we, with negativity, what's not right with the world, what's going on. And we live in very crazy times, but also potentially very exciting times as well, because I think in the birth of us all, there is this potentiality to realize who we really are, collectively, individually, with our conscious awareness in a way that humanity has never realized before. So it's a very, very simple concept. And if you look at some of the monastic traditions, they would have a habit of writing down in a little notebook all the thoughts that they'd had throughout the day. That serves to be a reminder of how many times their thoughts deviated away from the love of God. So if you look at that concept and the bands, I am loving awareness, anything that's positive, it's taking your attention, and it serves to be a reminder just to be in the spirit of loving energy, of loving awareness, and don't get caught up in the trap of thinking in a judgmental way, in an unkind way, in a negative way, fearful. So the bands that I had made at the various courses that you've been to, that had that little statement. So as soon as you let slip, obviously you have to change the band over to the other wrist. Some of my friends have said they don't bother doing that. They just ping the band instead.
Well, I used to find it was, I learned quite quickly when I was having a fear-based thought, because it would give me a waxing, Eileen, as I took it off as well.
Yeah, that's good. These little things, it's a little technique. It serves to be a reminder to live in the spirit of loving awareness and positivity. And we all need reminders because, we can't deny that as sensitive beings, that we are affected by what's out there in the collective consciousness. And so as a sensitive particularly, it's very, very easy to get caught up in this sort of fusion of spiraling negative energy that's out there. And a lot of people are getting caught up in the fear at the moment,
They are. And it takes, and this was something else you mentioned, because if you were having, and I used to find that I would get into these, I'd have an anxiety, and then sometimes it'd be so overpowering that, you just get into this spiral of it. But it takes time and effort to rewire your subconscious and your default way of thinking, but it can be done.
21 days, apparently. Research that's been done into this has they found that if you can stay 21 days in the spirit of, positive energy as often as you can, you rewire all your neural networks. So it is possible. It's the same as not making a judgment about somebody, because not to make judgments, just to accept people for who they are, because so many people go around judging, each other.
They do.
It's not fertile energy to enhance your spiritual powers of awareness. So it's just little reminders, and that's very powerful.
And it's worth saying, if you are stuck in that kind of 21 days is not a long time. And I noticed after being aware of it, within 7 days, I think I would say that after 7 days, I was rewired, Eileen. It was a very effective experiment.
Mm-hmm.
Because mediumship, what do you feel its purpose is?
Well, I've said for many years, I think that within the spiritualist movement, people essentially have got stuck in the message. So, and then they've got maybe into developing their own mediumistic powers of awareness. And consequently, what happens, that becomes the be all and end all. But it really should just lead us to the threshold of our own awakening. If those in the unseen world are making all that effort to communicate, why are they making that effort? Because they want us to have the realization that we are all divine, that life here, every single moment is sacred. What is your gift you're offering to life? What is your relationship with yourself, with those around you, with the spirit world, with nature, with everything, because everything is in communication, in communion with each other in some shape or form. And you mentioned a moment ago about the picture, the image, and you felt how that person had a slightly negative energy. Well, that's exactly the concept of psychometry. And our old mediums were trained first as psychometrists, which essentially comes from the French and means soul measuring. So any article that you've worn, if you've got a ring that belongs to someone, it will be imbued with their vibration, their energy. So, people don't like psychometry now. And the times I have done it in the past, people said, I never get this right. And that's because the first port of call is the mind, is the brain. What is this? Who has had it, rather than listening to the language of energy and vibration.
Yeah, you get a pocket watch. Oh, that's a granddad. That is, yes.
That's it. And it's the same, so I believe that when people used to go into somewhere that some tragedy or occurrence had happened of a negative nature, they would say, we can feel the ghost, the spirit of the whoever it was that was murdered or whatever. But essentially, because I don't believe in the saying of what people that pass are earthbound or anything like that, I just can't buy into that one at all. But what's happened, there's been an energetic photograph taken of the events. The energy, the vibration of the trauma is impregnated into the atmosphere. And that's what the people are tapping into, rather than some poor soul who they're making now as forevermore, eternally going to be connected to that place where that, tragedy happens. So it's very interesting. There's so much still we don't know, basically.
There is. And I do think I do agree with you that I think we're coming up to this time of, I think we're coming up to a time of mass awakening. It feels like the pressure on everything is just getting ready to explode in this world at the moment. And it makes me, very sad. I want to get back to the ways of the land. But, and I think that's such an important point as well. I wanted to, so the problem with the soul sync, Eileen, is we could go down 1,000,001 rabbit holes, and I normally do. And I wanted to go back to mediumship for a moment as well, because a lot of people who listen to this podcast, they are really wanting to develop their mediumship. And I wanted to ask about your advice for people trying to unfold it, because like you said, there's so many, because I think the world we live in now, there's so much overload of information. I find it overwhelming. So, even now, I used to just accept on Channel 4, Eileen. That was it. Channels 1 to 4. Now I sit there on Netflix for an hour before I've even decided something. And then I start it and then I'm distracted by my phone pinging off. And, it's... I've got ADHD brain at the best of times. Yes.
Yeah, there's something to be said for an overload on availability, isn't there? A choice, really, because that, you spend half the time deciding which route to go down, rather than just the old days when you just pressed a switch and you were very limited. And, I think, again, we have to go back to the grassroots of it all. And, because tutors will come and go, mediums will come and go, ways, methods will come and go. But the one constant is the spirit world, their wisdom, their love, their influence, their teaching and direction. And I think now it will be helpful to teach people how to more fully and deeply connect themselves with their own spirit team. If you look at the history of spiritualism, all the fabulous mediums knew who their spirit helpers were, their spirit influences were in the unseen world. They all knew them. They had a relationship with them. They were their spirit team, their friends. Very, very interesting, because many years ago, and it would have been back in the 1980s, and I was at the Arthur Finney College, and I was very lucky that Gordon Higginson had myself and another medium from Aberdeen doing some little teaching sessions, and he had us both up demonstrating. And he said, now, how interesting, Gordon said. He said, because the other medium left their spirit team completely out of the experience and were working independently. He said, but I work completely and absolutely through my spirit helpers. Now, it doesn't mean to say that they're giving me the information, because that would slow the whole process down, but more that I was more fully immersed in their presence and the connection. So to become one. And that was really, really interesting. And so I think there is a tendency nowadays that people think they can do it alone. They can do it without the cooperation of their spirit team. So there isn't too many people encouraging the development of the relationship, who is there with them. And that doesn't mean they've got to be somebody famous in the past history. It just means to develop a sense of awareness of when they're close. Because, I'm quite shy by nature, really, and I don't particularly like being up in front of people and all the rest of it. And yet my whole life, that's what I've done. But I can do it because I'm aware of the presence of those who help me and support me in the spirit world. Excuse me. So it's really, really interesting. So I think going back to fostering, to nurturing a relationship with your spirit helpers. And we do that by being in the stillness, being in the silence, and reaching out to them like you would a friend, asking them to draw near. I feel your presence? Can I perceive a closeness? And then you start getting a sense of a communication from them.
That makes us one of the biggest questions that I get asked on this podcast, and it's something that plagued me for a very long time, which is about sitting in the power. It's now I know that I am the power. I now, I've come to obviously a lot of these realizations, but to so many people, even the concept is so confusing, and to even discover what it is. So I guess for the listener listening, how would you describe someone trying to... Because I spent a year, Eileen, trying to find where the power switch was. And then realised there wasn't one because it's already on.
That's right. It's a sense of connection with the presence, the power and the presence of our own eternal being. So it begins by the recognition of that which is sacred and divine within our own being. And as the recognition begins to move to the light of conscious awareness, to then expand, have a sense of expansion, because the power is the same power that is within all life. And it makes you realize that you can never be separate from life. That same power that is within you is within me and everybody else, and all manifest form. But that which is seen and unseen, that which is heard, yet also silent. So it allows this recognition of this interbeing, interconnectedness with all life. I mean, it's very interesting that physicists are speaking about, and have been for some years now, the entanglement theory, that everything is connected one with the other in the universe. And the mystics have been saying that for years and years and hundreds of years. The poets have been saying that. Francis Thompson, one of my little favourite poems, when he said, all things by immortal power hiddenly to each other linked are, that thou canst not touch a flower without the troubling of a star. Now, Francis Thompson was really speaking about is what the physicists would call now entanglement theory. Everything is connected by this divine matrix of energy, of invisible threads of consciousness that interweave all creation, all life. So that's what was the result of the poets, the mystics, the artists, the seers, when they connected and had this contemplative experience of complete oneness with all life. And so all the works of art, all the incredible poetry, very often is pointing us to something eternal and something divine.
I'm going to do an awful job at explaining this, but I've started, you have these different light bulb moments where you start to join up dots, but I've started to feel that, okay, if there is the collective consciousness and we are all joined, and there is this collective consciousness of knowledge that we can access. And I've started to also think, okay, but doesn't that mean that we're then limitless beings? Because you told me a story, and I might do an awful job, but you told me that you've come across someone pulling a crystal out of the air. And I've come across, I interviewed someone on this podcast in the very beginning who was telling me about a guy that he had gone to see in China who could manifest GPS devices to 100 kilometers away. And I've started to think that if we are this limitless being of unlimited potential, the only thing stopping us in our life is our own mind.
Absolutely, is our own conditioning.
Yes.
Is our own conditioning, because we become a product of our own conditioning. And, look at children. They have this beautiful connection with their inner self, with their spirit. They look through the eyes of wonder and magic, and everything's a mystery. And what happens? We go to school and we have to conform. Nothing wrong, of course, with education, but we have to do what we're told. We have to conform. And, little by little, that divine connection that children have is sort of forgotten until we become so immersed in all the labels, in all the conditionings, in all the have-tos, must-dos, we forget who we really are. So for me, coming into spiritualism, you said a little while ago, what's the whole meaning of it? It's really awakening to the realization of who we really are, because we can get so caught up in all the distractions of life, we forget. And we can go so far down that track, we get so immersed in all the distractions that completely come up at us in throughout the stages of our lives, that we forget who we really are until there's a hunger in the soul. There's that place we reach where there's something missing in my life. When you have that moment where you think, well, I've got this, I've achieved that, but there's something more. And people don't always have the capacity to realize what is that space? What is that space within them that it has a hunger to have the experience of awakening, of realization of who they really are, the pure self.
Well, that you kind of described textbook my story, really. for years had worked and worked and worked. And then, you know, I had everyone coming up to me all the time saying, you're successful, you've done really well. I was feeling bloody miserable. And I just because driving around in a nice car, but I'd never felt so damn miserable. And it was because of that reason, because I thought, well, this was everything I ever wanted.
Mm-hmm.
But now I've got it, there's something missing, and I was being called to it. And, you know, I've realised, you know, the journey of a medium is obviously, well, I say obviously, one of healing. But how do you hit? Because, you know, we get to this point where we have this calling, this moment, this, you know, things are not working for us anymore. But then we've got all these limiting beliefs, all these conditioning, all of these traumas. How do we heal all of these things? I'm asking you $1 million impossible question, Eileen.
No, not at all. I think we have to recognize the place in us that is suffering, the place within us that is calling to be heard, calling to be listened to be recognized for who we really are. Because very often we live life caught up in the appearance of things, in the labels, in the attachment to the roles that we play. And healing is about the recognition of, first of all, what within me needs healed. Where do I need to, what place in me is hurting the most? And how can I remember who I really am? Because, you know, it's about honoring who we really are, and not looking back with anger, not looking back. And, you know, excuse me, I think sometimes there is a tendency for people's minds to keep going over and over and over the past. And again, that can come back to allowing ourselves to be totally present within the moment, acknowledging what has happened. What we can't change the past, but we can change how we perceive the past, even if it's a trauma, even if it's something where, you know, we completely and absolutely feel wounded. And I think the danger is when people close their hearts, they can't love anymore because of being damaged or hurt, you know, from past relationships. And we all have relationships that are challenging. We all very often have a parent somewhere. You know, I think you're very blessed if you have two parents that are sound, that haven't got any of that. Because everybody's a product of the generation, you know, that's gone before. And, you know, first 7 years of our life, we're told by the psychotherapist, is the most important of all, because, you know, the person is being shaped in those first 7 years by their parental influences, by the relationships and dynamics of the relationships of those in their orbit as a child. And I think the more sensitive you are, the more then difficult it becomes. But we're all wounded. But I think that in a way it's embracing it and saying, you know, if you said to 100 people in front of you, and I've done this before, put your hand up if you've never had a problem, put your hand up if you've never been wounded or experienced suffering, you know, because everybody has suffered. We're not here to suffer. We're here to discover who we really are, to experience existence in all its facets, but not to be so sort of have our minds so colored that we forget how to love. Because I think it is about losing touch when we become wounded. So healing, I think if we believe that we are perfect as we are, that we are whole, that there's nothing wrong with you, whoever you are, however you think or feel, it's about embracing that. Because so many people have been told there's something wrong with them, or you don't fit in, or you're not normal, or, you know, what is normal? What is fitting?
What is normal? I wouldn't even want to be normal now.
No.
It sounds boring, Eileen.
It does sound boring, but it's very true, isn't it? You know, that it's the crazy people are all the creative souls, all those who have never conformed, who've always felt they don't fit in. And yeah. And I think healing, when we allow ourselves just to be vulnerable, just to allow our vulnerability to be witnessed by somebody we trust or love, that we can share and who will be fully present for us. I think healing isn't just by the laying of hands or setting the intent. It has to be proactive from the person who is willing to let go of whatever the root cause is. I mean, I know people who wear their illnesses.
Yeah, I do. And there is, I feel that I've now got to the point where I believe that stress and negative thinking just causes disease. And I have come to the opinion now that if you are someone that, suppresses or represses your emotions, that lives within you, and it needs to be let out.
Absolutely. Through creativity, whether it's through painting or writing or playing music, because it's externalizing, it's crystallizing the energy of emotion that you have within you, and it's putting it out there. And when you externalize it, it's transformative. So that's when there is a tremendous freeing of whatever it is that you've been holding on to can be released then.
One of the questions, because a lot of people who discover this podcast, Eileen, they're at a point where, they maybe want to believe in the spirit world and life is eternal. But, the $1 million question, what do you think happens when we die? What is that? Well, die. I'm already using the wrong word, aren't I? But, for people that are listening to this that are scared to death, what do you, or for all your years of knowledge, believe happens to us from that moment when we take our last breath? What do we teleport up there, Eileen? Do we get shone?
I think it's a really interesting question. And, we are so conditioned, back to that word again, of concepts such as dead and alive here and there, that we're sort of making it, and the fears coming from that. And if you look at a lot of the Buddhist traditions, a lot of the Hindu traditions, that, they don't believe even in birth or death, you see, because once we create something like that, we create distinction, such as here and there, and as I said a moment ago, dead and alive. And, there's a beautiful passage in the Bhagavad Gita, which means song of God. I don't say that if you've had a glass of wine or two. And it says, the real you, water cannot wet, wind cannot dry, fire cannot burn, weapons cannot cleave. The real you is ancient, unborn, and eternal. And birth and death are just a parenthesis in the eternal continuum. So what I believe, we just kiss goodbye to our physical body and we are liberated. We are more free, more whole. Our senses are heightened. We see, hear, know, feel, all in the same breath of a moment. And those we have known and shared a journey with, who we really deeply love, will be there to help us make the transition. And I think that science now is very near proving the reality of the spirit world. In fact, I even wonder if they have, but they haven't yet put it out there, because that will make people waken up to being more responsible, because that is something that comes with knowing that life is eternal. We have to grow up spiritually. We can't say, oh, well, I didn't know. We have to. It makes us more spiritual. It makes us more responsible, more aware. So with that knowledge comes certain powers that I think then open out to us, that we have to really confront and say, I have to live a life from integrity, of honesty, of wanting to be the best I can. But, interestingly, I spent a lot of years working with a very beautiful friend and colleague, Glyn Edwards. And Glyn was terrified of dying. And yet he spent his whole life communicating with the spirit world. And yet, but I think his fear came from his worry that he hadn't achieved what he came here to do.
Do you know what? It's interesting you say that, because I'm no longer scared of the process of it, but my fear would be the same thing. It's about, you want to get as much into as possible and achieve everything. But then I bet when we arrive up there, you get up there and you go, oh my God, what was I extending that for? You know, I've arrived back. What do you think or feel happens what is this transition period into the spirit world like? Because, you know, I've heard things over the years where there's a life review where, you know, a lot of people believe you sort of arrive in front of God and he, you know, makes a decision on where you're going to end up. And I know that through a lot of trance, it's been described over the years, what the spirit world trying to communicate what that looks like. But what is your belief on?
Yeah, I do wholeheartedly believe that we see our entire life from the perspective of the observer. Of course, we're in our life, living it, so we can't see how our actions have affected others. And I think that we see how we sort of see on the screen of consciousness, whatever you want to call it, how our relationships were and how they could have been. And I also think that very often the areas that we failed have been our achievements. Things we feel, well, as we've journeyed through life, have been our achievements, have maybe not been an achievement in the way that we term or feel. I think because our whole perception and awareness will alter in a very, very real way.
And when we go up to, or I say up, when we go to the spirit world, do you believe that we have roles and duties and responsibilities? Because we come down here as a soul to learn a plan. So we go back up, you know, because I've read in, I wish I could remember what trance it was through, but you might know this story better than I do. There was a very religious man who had wrote do you know what? I'm not even going to try to explain it because already I'm going so wrong with it. But essentially, he came down, he had spoken, he'd done a book against spiritualism. And then when he went to the spirit world, he came back to want to prove through trance what really happens. But he had a particular role, and his role was to transition people over. So I was just wondering, you know, are we just on leisure time in the spirit world?
I think, you know, we can't sort of just suppose that learning is just here at this level. I think learning goes on, and we continue to evolve and grow, and we can only do that by having experiences. So I think whatever qualities, abilities, gifts, powers are inherent within the soul as an individual, we get an opportunity in the spirit world to fulfill ourselves. So yes, I do believe that there are certain roles, but I don't think anything is mandatory. I do believe in the unseen world, we have those who have our welfare, spiritual well-being at heart, and they help us maybe decide, you know, what direction. I think it's a little bit like signing up for a university degree. I'm you know, this is where my interests are. Can I study that? I think it's just a little bit the same in the spirit world. But we must have a sense of that our perspective will be coming from a completely different angle of vision. Now, not long after Gordon Higginson passed, the church I was connected with and connected with for so many years, I grew up in it really, Spiritualist Church, you know, not from a child, obviously, but when I discovered it at 19. And the church had a particular week at the Arthur Finney College. And just before Gordon passed, they changed all the terms and the conditions. So it was organised by the church. And because all the terms and conditions, it's like a block booking week. So the church had the responsibility for having to fill so many beds. Because it had all changed, it was sort of voted on. It was a collective opinion that it was too risky in case they didn't fill all the beds, etc. And I had this very, very vivid dream. And it was only a few weeks after Gordon had passed. And within it, he said that we would get a week again, and it would be the week of his birthday. But within this dream, this is why I'm saying this story, he was teaching people in the spirit world how to communicate with those still here on earth. So he was fulfilling what he was doing here, but from a different perspective. Now, that could have just been a dream, blah, blah, blah. But he prophesied something to me in this dream, because he said, you'll get the week with the right terms and conditions, but it will be the week of my birthday, of his birthday. And we got offered a week. Terms and conditions weren't right. It was too risky for the church. And that was in the summer. And then he said, no, thank you. And then they phoned back 2 weeks later and said, you can have a week and it will be in November. And it was the week of Gordon's birthday. So I think that was given just to prove that what I'd tapped into being aware of before was real. It wasn't just something my imagination or my mind was conjuring up in the dream state. It was real. So beautiful when you can get little bits, little droplets of proof like that.
What a fascinating story.
Yeah, it's beautiful. But he was teaching, and I think, what is our passion? Where is your passion in life? What do you enjoy doing most? So I think and feel that whatever is, makes your soul sing is what you will find yourself doing in the unseen world.
Oh, I do you know what? I just love the fact that you told me work was mandatory. I thought, oh, yes. I'm going to take the next millennia off.
Oh.
Yeah, well, I say that.
Yeah, but I don't think it's work. I mean, the definition of work is that we earn a living and, we need money and to survive at this level. But it will be a calling. Like, I believe real mediumship is a calling.
Yeah, I do as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I feel that because, well, I know from my own experience, it's not been an easy path. And I've often questioned, like, why am I even doing this at times? But then I get pulled back into it because I just know it's what I'm meant to do. And I feel that it is I very much agree with that. And I feel it's a calling. And there's something in it as well that people that I seem to come across that I believe are mediums who are called into it seem to have had the most traumatic lives imaginable. And there always seems to be, I know that you stated that everyone, has experienced some level of something, but there seems to be something with mediums where it seems to be on the next level. Is your observations the same? Is there something in that?
I think that there does seem to be a truth in that. Absolutely. I think that a lot of mediums haven't had an easy life, but then, if being here is like a university of experience, and it's by virtue of experience, all facets, suffering and the joys and everything else, as much that we grow and evolve. And ultimately we develop a compassionate heart. Otherwise, if you've gone through loss of someone close to you early in life, which a lot of mediums experience, then it gives a deeper layer and level of meaning to communicating, to being the in-between between heaven and earth. Mm-hmm. If you haven't had an experience where, Khalil Gibran said, the deeper that sorrow carves into your being, the more joy you can contain. And I think it's very, very true. So suffering creates a place where we can grow in love and compassion for other people's sufferings and difficulties.
For all your years of me, I'm going to come to an end and ask you for a final thought in a moment. I could sit here for hours, Eileen, quite frankly, just firing endless mediumship questions. But for all your years of work, and obviously I know that, you was trained from a certain lineage from mediums, and, I think that's beautiful. But what legacy do you hope that you have left through all your teaching over the years?
From my teaching, I think that, a lot of people, I feel very blessed, have come to me and said I've freed them in some way within their mediumship. And I think, well, if I've done that and I've helped them find their own place of power and love and deeper connection and awareness, and that's beautiful. For me, it's more important to be loving than to be the best medium. I mean, what is a definition of the best? It's from moment to moment, and you can give an amazing communication. But that's because of the spirit. That's because of their work that's gone on behind the scenes. I think to realize that there is not just one way, but it is about, and always will be, about how much love that you can emanate in your life. And through the realization that true mediumship is healing.
It's so lovely to have you on here. You're such a lovely guest.
Bless your heart. Well, it's been lovely. Yes, I could talk more, but there we go.
Would you like to leave us on a final thought to close your episode? And it can be anything. I asked this. Some people want to just say a couple of words. Some people go on for a whole another hour. No, they don't really. A whole monologue. How would you like to close your episode, Eileen?
Yeah, I think that it is about just allowing yourself to be the best you can be and not feeling a sense that you have to compete with anybody else, that you have to be anybody other than who you are, because nobody can be you. That's your role. That's your job, to be you as best you can, and just to leave the world a better place. I think that for me, and hopefully for anybody that's listening, I believe our life is created by our motives, our inner desires, what we want. And I think that if your motives are pure, if you cultivate clarity, a pure heart, if you can be the embodiment of kindness. I mean, when I look back on the people that have influenced me most, it hasn't been because they've been clever or, they've been super intelligent or this or that. It's because they've just been the embodiment of love. I think if I had to come back to again, I would want to be like Amma, the hugging saint. I think that's the most amazingly beautiful job you could ever be.
I'd like to come back in as a dolphin, but in a sea that hasn't got bottles all in it and nets.
Oh, no, well, I think, just being the embodiment of love.
Well, all that leaves me to say is, Eileen Davies, thank you so much for coming onto the Soul Sync.
Thank you. Got here at last.
We did.